On a bitter winter night in a small Midwestern town, Marcus Thompson made a choice that would change his life forever. A single father working 2 jobs to keep his daughter in a warm home, he had saved for months to buy her a special blanket for Christmas. But that evening, walking through the park after his late shift, he saw something that made him forget all his careful planning. A woman huddled on a bench, shivering violently, frost crystallizing on her dark eyelashes. Without hesitation, he wrapped his daughter's Christmas gift around the stranger's shoulders and walked away, never expecting to see her again. Little did he know, that simple act of kindness would ripple through time in ways he could never imagine. What happens when one moment of pure compassion meets destiny at a crossroads? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The leather-bound photo album sat open on Marcus Thompson's lap, its pages worn soft at the corners from years of gentle turning. In the dim light of his small living room, he traced his finger along the edge of a photograph. Sarah's mother, Catherine, holding their newborn daughter at the hospital. Her smile, radiant despite her exhaustion, still had the power to catch his breath 8 years later. "Daddy, are you looking at Mommy again?" Sarah's voice carried from the hallway, followed by the soft padding of her sock-covered feet on the worn carpet. Marcus closed the album carefully, setting it aside, as his daughter climbed onto the threadbare couch beside him. "Just remembering some good times, sweetheart." He wrapped an arm around her small shoulders, breathing in the sweet scent of the drugstore shampoo she insisted on because it smelled like strawberries. Their apartment wasn't much. 2 bedrooms in an aging complex on the quiet side of town, but Marcus had worked hard to make it feel like home. Sarah's artwork decorated the walls, bright splashes of crayon and watercolor that brought life to the beige walls. The kitchen, visible through the open archway, was small but spotless. Dishes from their modest dinner already dried and put away. "Can we look at the pictures together?" Sarah asked, reaching for the album. "I like the one where you're pushing me on the swing at the park." Marcus smiled, reopening the album. "That was your 3rd birthday. Your mom had just bought you that purple dress you wouldn't take off for weeks." The photograph showed a younger Sarah, her dark curls flying as she soared through the air, joy radiating from her face. Working 2 jobs meant Marcus couldn't always be there for moments like these, but he made every second count when he was home. The night shift as a security guard at Riverside Medical Center paid the bills, while his morning job as a janitor at the local high school kept them insured. Between shifts, he caught what sleep he could, setting his alarm to make sure he was awake when Sarah returned from school. "Miss Rodriguez says I'm getting really good at math," Sarah announced, turning another page in the album. "She says I might be able to skip ahead to the advanced group after Christmas break." Pride swelled in Marcus's chest. Despite their circumstances, Sarah was thriving. Her teacher, Elena Rodriguez, had become something of a guardian angel, keeping Sarah engaged with extra assignments and watching her in the after-school program when Marcus's shifts overlapped. A sharp wind rattled the windows, drawing Marcus's attention to the growing darkness outside. Winter had come early this year, and with it, the usual worries about heating bills and warm clothes. Sarah's winter coat from last year was already too small, the sleeves riding up past her wrists. "Time for bed, kiddo," Marcus said, noting the clock on the wall. "You've got school tomorrow, and I've got to head to work soon." Sarah hugged him tight, her small arms squeezing with surprising strength. "I love you, Daddy. Even if we can't have fancy things like Melissa's family, I think we have the best kind of rich." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "What kind is that?" "Love rich," she said simply, sliding off the couch. "That's what Ms. Rodriguez says when kids talk about having new phones and stuff. She says some people are money rich, but being love rich is better." Watching his daughter head to her room, Marcus couldn't help but agree. They might not have much, but what they had was precious beyond measure. He carefully returned the photo album to its place on the shelf, next to Catherine's well-worn copy of Pride and Prejudice and the small urn that held her ashes. Tonight would be another long shift, but like every night, he would do whatever it took to keep their small world turning. For Sarah, no sacrifice was too great, no hour too late, no task too humble. In her smile, he saw Catherine's strength, and in her eyes he found the resolve to face another day. The fluorescent lights of Riverside Medical Center hummed overhead as Marcus made his rounds, their sterile glow casting long shadows down the empty corridors. His security badge caught the light as he checked another door, the photo showing a younger version of himself, before the grey had started creeping into his temples, before the lines around his eyes had deepened into permanent reminders of sleepless nights. "Thompson, got a minute?" Jerry, his supervisor, called from the security office. The older man's face was illuminated by the blue glow of multiple monitors, each showing different areas of the hospital. Marcus checked his watch. 2:15 a.m. He'd been here since 11, and in 4 hours he'd head straight to the high school. But Jerry had been good to him, flexible with his schedule when Sarah needed him, so he stepped into the cramped office. "Sarah's report card came in today," Jerry said, holding up a slightly crumpled envelope. "Found it in your locker when I was doing the quarterly inspection. Figured you'd want to see it right away." Marcus took the envelope, heart quickening. Sarah had been worried about her science test last week, even though she'd studied for hours. At the kitchen table, textbook propped up against the sugar bowl during breakfast. "Go on, open it," Jerry encouraged, turning away from the monitors. "This place isn't going anywhere." The paper inside was crisp, official letterhead from Riverside, elementary spreading across the top. Marcus's eyes scanned the columns of grades, pride swelling in his chest. All A's except for 1 B+ in physical education. Sarah had inherited his academic drive, but her mother's distinct lack of athletic coordination. "She's doing great," Jerry commented, peering at the report card. "Smart kid like that, she'll go far. You know, my sister works in admissions at State. When the time comes, I could put in a word." A crackle from the radio cut him off. "Security needed in the ER, possible disturbance." "I've got it," Marcus said, carefully folding the report card and tucking it into his breast pocket, right next to his heart. The weight of it there reminded him why he did this, why he walked these halls at night while other fathers slept, why he scrubbed floors in the morning while other parents headed to office jobs. The disturbance turned out to be a drunk college student who twisted his ankle trying to sled down the hill behind his dorm. Marcus handled it with the patience that had become his trademark, calming the boy down while the nurses did their work. By the time he returned to his rounds, his mind had drifted back to the report card. Catherine would have been so proud. She'd been a teacher herself, passionate about education, until the cancer took that away too. The memory of her last days in this very hospital still haunted these halls. But tonight, with Sarah's achievements pressed against his chest, the pain felt more distant. Dawn found Marcus changing into his janitorial uniform in the high school's small maintenance room. The report card had moved to his wallet now, tucked behind Sarah's school photo, where he could peek at it during his breaks. "Morning, Marcus," Linda, the cafeteria manager, called as he wheeled his cart past the kitchen. The smell of industrial-strength coffee and warming breakfast foods filled the air. "You're looking cheerful today." Sarah's report card came in. He explained, pulling it out to show her. Linda had 3 kids of her own in college now, and she'd become something of a mentor to him in all things parenting. "Would you look at those grades?" She beamed, adjusting her hairnet. "That girl's going places, Marcus. Here, take these." She pressed 2 warm breakfast sandwiches into his hands. "Can't clean on an empty stomach." The morning passed in its usual rhythm of mopping, scrubbing, and polishing. Each task was a step toward Sarah's future. Every paycheck, another brick in the foundation he was building for her. The report card was his talisman today, reminding him that their sacrifices were bearing fruit. Between classes, he caught glimpses of Ms. Rodriguez in her classroom, already preparing for the day's lessons. She waved when she saw him, and he made a mental note to thank her again for all her help with Sarah. Good people, he'd learned, were the true wealth in life, and somehow, despite everything, he and Sarah had found themselves rich in that particular currency. In the quiet of his lunch break, Marcus unfolded a carefully written letter from his jacket pocket. Sarah's Christmas wish list, composed in her best penmanship, had been slipped into his work bag that morning. Unlike other children's lists filled with electronics and expensive toys, Sarah's was remarkably simple. Dear Santa, and Daddy, because I know you help him. A warm blanket, like the one in Mommy's old picture, new colored pencils for drawing A, and a chapter book about horses, for Daddy to not work so hard. Love, Sarah. The first item made his throat tight. He knew exactly which picture she meant, the one of Catherine wrapped in her grandmother's hand-knitted blanket, reading on their old porch. Swing! The blanket had been lost in their move after her passing, when they'd had to downsize to the apartment. You okay there, Marcus? Linda asked, setting down her coffee mug. The teacher's lounge was empty except for them, the afternoon sun casting long shadows through the windows. He handed her the list. She remembers the blanket. I didn't think she would. She was so young when Catherine... Linda read the list, her expression softening. Children remember love, Marcus. That blanket wasn't just a blanket to her. He nodded, remembering the last conversation with Catherine in the hospital. She'd made him promise to keep their traditions alive, to make sure Sarah never felt the absence of her mother's love. The blanket had been part of that. Weekend mornings spent reading together, wrapped in its warm embrace. I found one, he admitted quietly, at that boutique downtown. Hand-knitted, same pattern and everything. Been putting aside a little each week since September. He didn't mention the extra shifts he'd picked up, the lunches he'd skipped, to save those few extra dollars. The storm's supposed to hit this weekend, Linda commented, glancing out at the gathering clouds. They're saying it might be the coldest December we've had in years. Marcus thought of the money he'd saved, tucked away in an old coffee can in his kitchen cabinet. Just enough for the blanket, with a little left over for the colored pencils and book. It would be worth every penny to see Sarah's face on Christmas morning, to watch her wrap herself in that same warmth that had once embraced her mother. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. As he gathered his cleaning supplies, Ms. Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, her expression concerned. Marcus, do you have a minute? It's about Sarah. His heart skipped, but Ms. Rodriguez quickly raised a reassuring hand. Nothing bad, I promise. She fell asleep during reading time today, said she was up late waiting for you to come home from your shift. The guilt was immediate and familiar. The hospital's been short-staffed. I had to stay late, and then with the morning shift here, you're doing an amazing job, Ms. Rodriguez assured him. Sarah tells everyone how proud she is of her daddy. But maybe we could adjust her after-school schedule, let her rest a bit in the library during study period. Marcus nodded gratefully. Catherine, her mother, used to say that libraries were like warm hugs for the mind. Sarah would curl up with her under that old blanket, and they'd read for hours. She mentions that blanket sometimes, Miss Rodriguez said softly. When we read in class, she says it was magic because it could hold both her and her mom and all. Their stories, too. Outside, the first few snowflakes began to fall, dancing past the windows like tiny stars. Marcus watched them, thinking of another promise he'd made to Catherine, that their daughter would never forget what it felt like to be completely, unconditionally loved. The blanket in the boutique window wasn't magic. It couldn't bring Catherine back or make their lives easier, but maybe, just maybe, it could help keep that promise alive. For now, that would have to be enough. The boutique's display window glowed like a beacon in the gathering darkness, a small pool of warmth against the bitter December evening. Marcus stood before it, his breath fogging the glass, the precious envelope of cash clutched in his gloved hand. Behind him, The town's ancient clock tower struck 9, its chimes muffled by the thickening snowfall. The blanket waited there, draped artfully over an antique chair, cream-colored wool with intricate cable patterns that Catherine's grandmother had called Irish ropes of love. The price tag dangled from one corner, a sum that represented 3 months of careful saving, of coffee made at home and walks to work when the weather permitted. The shop had closed an hour ago, but Mrs. Chen, the owner, had promised to stay. Late, she'd watched him stop at this window every morning for months, had seen him counting coins in the coffee shop next door. When he'd finally told her he was ready to buy it, her eyes had crinkled with understanding. The small bell above the door chimed as he stepped inside, shaking snow from his coat. The blanket, when Mrs. Chen carefully wrapped it in tissue paper, was even softer than he'd imagined. "Your daughter," Mrs. Chen said, her accent gentle as she folded the paper. "She is very lucky to have such a father." Marcus thought of Sarah, probably already in bed, dreaming of Christmas morning. "I'm the lucky one," he replied, tucking the precious package inside his coat to protect it from the snow. The storm had intensified during those few minutes inside the shop. Wind whipped down the empty streets, sending eddies of snow dancing under the streetlights. Marcus pulled his collar higher, grateful for the shortcut through Henderson Park that would get him home 15 minutes faster. The park was deserted, the children's playground already buried under fresh snow. His footprints were the first to mark the path, each step accompanied by the soft crunch of fresh powder. The package pressed against his chest, warm despite the cold, filled with all his hopes for Christmas morning. He almost missed her in the swirling snow, a dark figure huddled on a bench near the park's center. At first, he thought it was just shadow and storm playing tricks on his eyes. But then she moved, just slightly, and he saw her clearly. A woman wearing only a light jacket, her dark hair dusted with snow. Marcus slowed his pace. The responsible thing would be to call the police or direct her to the shelter on 5th Street, but something in her posture, the way she held herself so still, as if moving would shatter something fragile inside her, made him pause. "Mom?" His voice was nearly lost in the wind. "Are you all right?" She looked up slowly, and Marcus felt his breath catch. Her face was striking, with high cheekbones and deep brown eyes, but it was the frost on her eyelashes and the blue tinge to her. Lips that made his heart clench. "I'm fine," she said, her voice cultured despite its tremor. "Just thinking." Nobody sat in a park during a snowstorm just to think. Marcus knew the signs of someone running from something. He'd seen enough of them at the hospital. Whatever. Her story was, she was clearly in no state to be out here. "The shelter on 5th, he began. "No shelters," she cut in sharply, then softened. "Please, I just need time." The wind picked up, cutting through Marcus's heavy coat. If it was reaching him, she must be freezing. His hand went to the package inside his jacket, feeling its soft weight. Sarah's face flashed in his mind, her excitement about the blanket. She'd seen in her mother's photo the way she'd described it as magical. "You'll freeze out here," he said quietly, already knowing what he was going to do, understanding the cost, but unable to do anything else. Catherine would have done the same. More importantly, he needed Sarah to grow up understanding that sometimes love meant giving away the thing you wanted most. The woman started to protest as he withdrew the package, but her words died as he carefully unwrapped the tissue paper, revealing the cream-colored wool beneath. "It's not much," he said, draping the blanket around her shoulders, "but it's warm." She reached up to touch the fabric, her fingers trembling. "I can't." "You can," Marcus said simply. "Just, when you're done thinking, make sure someone else who needs it gets it, okay?" He turned before she could respond, before he could change his mind. The wind at his back now seemed to push him forward, away from the bench and the woman and the blanket that had held so many dreams. He didn't hear her call out softly behind him, her voice lost in the storm. The walk home was longer without the package warming his chest. Each step felt heavier than the last, his mind already working on what he'd tell Sarah on Christmas morning. Maybe he could find something at the second-hand store or make her something himself, though his crafting skills were minimal at best. As he climbed the stairs to their apartment, snow melting from his boots, he thought of the woman in the park. He hoped she'd find whatever she was looking for, hoped the blanket would keep her warm until she did. Somewhere in the distance, the clock tower struck 10. Its chimes echoing across the snow-covered town, marking the moment when one small act of kindness set greater forces in motion. Inside his empty apartment, Marcus stood for a long moment, in Sarah's doorway, watching her sleep. Her small face was peaceful, one arm wrapped around the worn teddy bear Catherine had given her. On her desk, the Christmas list sat innocently, the first item circled in red crayon. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," he whispered, "but sometimes being love-rich means sharing that love with others." He closed her door softly, not knowing that somewhere in the swirling snow a woman sat wrapped in cream-colored wool, touching the intricate patterns with wondering fingers, her heart slowly thawing along with her body, not knowing that his simple act of kindness had just changed not only his life, but the lives of everyone in their small town in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. The empty mason jar sat on Marcus's kitchen counter, mocking him in the grey light of morning. He'd emptied his coffee into a chipped mug, but couldn't bring himself to put the jar away yet. For months, it had been his repository of hope. Every spare dollar, every bit of change, even the small tips he sometimes received for helping elderly patients to their cars at the hospital. Now it held nothing but air and lingering guilt. "Daddy, can we have pancakes?" Sarah padded into the kitchen, her school uniform slightly rumpled, dark curls wild from sleep. "It's Friday, and Miss Rodriguez says Friday pancakes are a tradition in her family." Marcus forced a smile, pulling her into a tight hug. "How about oatmeal with extra brown sugar today? We'll save pancakes for the weekend." He didn't mention that the pancake mix was one of many small luxuries he'd stopped buying to save for the blanket. The morning news played softly from their ancient radio, mostly weather reports about the continuing storm. But something in the announcer's voice caught Marcus's attention as he stirred the oatmeal. And in business news, speculation continues about the whereabouts of Elena Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Enterprises, who has not been seen in public for over a week. Sources close to the company suggest... Sarah interrupted his listening by spilling milk on the counter, and Marcus turned his attention back to their morning routine. He had more immediate concerns than missing CEOs, like figuring out how to make Christmas magical without the one gift that mattered most. At work, the empty jar weighed on his mind. Linda found him in the supply closet during his break, staring at the bulletin board where local charities posted their holiday assistance programs. "Everything okay?" she asked, though her expression suggested she already knew it wasn't. "I did something last night," Marcus began, then told her about the woman in the park, the blanket, his decision. The words tumbled out like the coins he'd counted so carefully for months. Linda listened without interrupting, her face softening with understanding. When he finished, she squeezed his arm gently. "You know, the community center is running their annual Christmas program. They help parents who are—" "I can't," Marcus cut in, pride stiffening his spine. "We're not charity cases. We're getting by." "It's not charity, Marcus. It's community. Remember last spring when you fixed Mrs. Peterson's wheelchair for free, or when you stayed late to help set up for the school fundraiser? This town runs on people helping people." He thought of Sarah's face, how she lit up when talking about the blanket in her mother's photo. I wanted to give her something special, something that connected her to Catherine." "Sometimes the most special gifts aren't things at all," Linda mused. "Last night, you taught Sarah something more valuable than any blanket. She just doesn't know it yet." The afternoon crept by in a haze of floor wax and disinfectant. During his lunch break, Marcus found himself walking past the boutique again. The window display had been changed. The antique chair sat empty now, and he wondered if somewhere the woman from the park was still wrapped in cream-colored wool. At the hospital that night, Jerry caught him staring at the community bulletin board near the ER entrance. "You know," the older man said carefully, "my kids still talk about the Christmas when I lost my job. We couldn't afford anything fancy, so we made presents instead. My daughter got a dollhouse I built from old shipping boxes. Wasn't pretty, but 20 years later, she's still got it." Marcus thought of his own meager carpentry skills, of Sarah's love for stories. Maybe he could build her a bookshelf, paint it with scenes from her favorite tales. It wouldn't be the same as the blanket, but perhaps Linda was right. The best gifts were the ones that carried love in their making. The empty jar waited on his counter when he returned home, translucent in the streetlight filtering through their kitchen window. Sarah had left a note inside. "Dear Daddy, I love you more than all the money in the world, even more than pancakes." Marcus picked up the jar, finally ready to put it away. As he did, he caught his reflection in the glass, tired eyes, worry lines, but something else too. Something that looked a lot like his mother's determination, Catherine's compassion. Maybe being love-rich meant more than just having love. To give. Maybe it meant having the courage to give it away when someone needed it more than you did. The Riverside Daily Herald's headline screamed across the breakroom counter, "Missing billionaire, spotted in small town." Below it, a grainy security camera photo showed a woman hurrying through the bus station, her face partially obscured but achingly familiar to Marcus. His coffee grew cold as he stared at the image, remembering frost on dark eyelashes and trembling fingers touching cream-colored wool. "Can you believe it?" Rita, one of the ER nurses, tapped the newspaper. "Eleanor, Blackwood right here in Riverside. They're saying she's worth billions. Inherited the whole Blackwood enterprise when her father passed last year. Then poof, vanishes without a trace last week." Marcus barely registered her words. He was focused on the smaller photo beside the article, an official portrait of Elena. Blackwood at some charity gala. Without the snow and desperation, she was almost unrecognizable. Almost, but not quite. "Makes you wonder what she's running from," Jerry mused, appearing with his ever-present clipboard. "Companies in an uproar. Board of directors threatening to declare her mentally unfit or some such nonsense." A distant rumbling drew their attention to the windows. But it wasn't thunder. A sleek private helicopter was descending toward the hospital's helipad, its black surface gleaming against the winter sky. "Well, well," Rita clucked, "looks like the search party's arrived." Marcus slipped away before the suits and security teams could flood the hospital, his mind spinning. The woman he'd given the blanket to, Sarah's special blanket, was one of the wealthiest people in the country. The same woman who'd been sitting alone in a snowstorm, refusing shelter, seeking... What? His phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "Turn on the news when you can. Town's going crazy. Some rich woman's security team just pulled up to the diner asking questions." Outside his locker, he could hear orderlies gossiping about black SUVs circling downtown, about men in expensive suits showing photos to shopkeepers. Mrs. Chen from the boutique had apparently been interviewed about suspicious customers, though she'd just smiled her mysterious smile and offered them tea. By the time his shift ended and he reached the high school, the story had grown, parents dropping off. Their children whispered about secret romances and corporate conspiracies. Someone claimed the Blackwood family had old ties to the town. Another swore they'd seen Elena in the library, disguised as a student. "Daddy!" Sarah's voice cut through his distraction as he cleaned near her classroom. "Everyone's talking about a princess. Jimmy says she's hiding in town like in that movie we watched, the one where the princess works at the flower shop and falls in love with the normal guy." Marcus felt his chest tighten. Sometimes people just need a break from their regular lives. "Sweetheart, being a princess probably gets tiring." "Like how you get tired from working so much?" Sarah asked, her insight striking him like a physical blow. Maybe she just wanted to be normal for a little while. That's what Ms. Rodriguez said when kids were being nosy. Speaking of Ms. Rodriguez, she appeared in her classroom doorway, a concerned look on her face. "Sarah, honey, why don't you go help Mrs. Patterson set up for art class? I need a quick word with your father." Once Sarah was out of earshot, Ms. Rodriguez spoke quietly. "The media's starting to arrive. Vans with satellite dishes, reporters asking questions. I wanted you to know we're keeping the children away from the windows and supervising outdoor time carefully." Marcus nodded gratefully, but she wasn't finished. "There's something else. A woman came by the school office this morning. Very professional, very polite. She was asking about anyone who might have helped a female stranger during the storm 2 nights ago. His hands tightened on his mop handle. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing," she said simply. "It wasn't my story to tell." "But Marcus, if what I suspect is true, your act of kindness might not stay anonymous for long." The morning sun caught the windows he'd cleaned earlier, throwing scattered light across the hallway floor. Somewhere in that light, he could almost see the path forward, beginning to form, though where it led, he couldn't yet guess. The private jet's arrival brought Riverside to a standstill. It descended from the winter sky like some magnificent bird, touching down on the small municipal airstrip that hadn't seen anything grander than crop dusters in decades. Marcus watched through the high school's second-floor windows as a convoy of black SUVs pulled away from the airport, their tinted windows reflecting the morning sun. He didn't expect them to turn into the school parking lot. "Mr. Thompson," the school secretary's voice crackled over the ancient intercom, "your presence is requested in the principal's office." The walk down the familiar hallway felt surreal. Through classroom windows, he could see students pressing their faces to the glass, whispering excitedly about the expensive cars outside. Sarah's class was among them, and she waved as he passed, seemingly unconcerned about her father being summoned like a troubled student. The principal's office door was closed. When he knocked, it was Ms. Rodriguez who opened it, her expression a mix of concern and something else. Excitement, maybe. The room beyond was crowded with suits and earpieces, and in the center of it all— "Hello, Marcus," Elena Blackwood said softly, rising from her chair. She wore an elegantly tailored cream-colored suit now, but her eyes were the same ones he'd seen in the park. Deep, searching, human, despite all the trappings of wealth surrounding her. The principal cleared his throat. "Mr. Thompson, Ms. Blackwood has requested a private conversation with you. Ms. Rodriguez has offered her classroom, as it's her planning period." Elena stepped forward, reaching into her jacket pocket. The security team tensed automatically, but she only withdrew a small leather card holder. "Perhaps we could talk about a blanket and kindness offered without expectation of return." Business card she handed him was simple, despite its obvious quality. Elena Blackwood, CEO, in understated black text. The Blackwood Enterprises logo, a subtle watermark. On the back, she'd written in elegant script, "Thank you for reminding me what matters." The walk to Ms. Rodriguez's classroom was silent, their footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. 2 security guards followed at a discreet distance, but at Elena's gesture, they remained outside when she closed the door. "You look better," Marcus said finally, because someone had to speak first. Warmer. A smile touched her lips. "Thanks to you." She moved to the windows, looking out at the playground, where children would soon have their recess. "I've spent the last week trying to find you. Mrs. Chen at the boutique. She finally told us this morning. She said she wanted to be sure of our intentions first." "The blanket," Marcus began, but Elena held up a hand, "was meant for your daughter. Sarah, isn't it? Mrs. Chen told us about that too, about how you saved for months." She turned to face him, and there were tears in her eyes. "Do you know what I was doing in that park that night?" Marcus shook his head. "Running away," she said simply. "The board was threatening to oust me, claiming I was too soft for business. Too focused on our charitable foundations instead of profit margins. My own uncle—" She stopped, composing herself. I was trying to prove them wrong by becoming what they wanted, cold, calculating. I forgot who I was, who my father raised me to be. And then, you needed help, Marcus said quietly. That's all that mattered. But it isn't, she insisted. You gave away something precious, something meant for your child, to help a complete stranger. No questions, no expectations, just kindness, pure and simple. She smiled suddenly. My father used to say that true character is revealed in what you do when you think no one is watching. Outside, the morning bell rang. Soon the hallways would flood with students, and the principal would need his cleaning staff back at work. Reality pressing in on this surreal moment. I'd like to help you, Elena said, reaching into her briefcase. Not charity, an investment. In kindness, in character, in the kind of world I want to build. She withdrew a folder. I have a proposal, a position in our community outreach division. Your experience, your heart, it's exactly what we need. Marcus stared at the folder, thinking of Sarah's wish for him not to work so hard, of Catherine's dreams for their daughter's future. I need time to think, Eleanor nodded, understanding in her eyes. She placed her card on top of the folder. Take all the time you need. And Marcus, the blanket. It wasn't just wool and yarn. It was a reminder of humanity in a world that often forgets it exists. Thank you for that. As she turned to leave, she paused. Oh, and one more thing. I had Mrs. Chen order another blanket. Same pattern, same everything. It should be ready for Christmas morning. Her smile was warm, genuine. Some gifts are too important not to give twice. The job offer letter sat on Marcus's kitchen table, its heavyweight paper and embossed letterhead seeming out of place among the everyday bills and Sarah's school notices. The salary figure made his head spin, more than his current 2 jobs, combined with benefits he'd only dreamed of. But it was the handwritten note at the bottom that kept drawing his eye. Marcus, this isn't about repaying kindness. It's about recognizing someone who embodies the values that built Blackwood Enterprises. My father started this company believing that business could be both profitable and humane. Help me prove him right. Eleanor, is it from the princess? Sarah asked, spreading peanut butter on her toast. The morning news played quietly in the background, showing footage of Elena's jet at the local airport. She's not a princess, sweetheart. She's a businesswoman who needed some help. Marcus folded the letter carefully, tucking it into his jacket pocket. And yes, she offered me a job. Doing what? Sarah's eyes sparkled with curiosity. Helping people, he said simply, like we always try to do, just maybe on a bigger scale. The thought followed him to work, where news of Elena's offer had somehow already spread. Small towns had their own kind of gravity, pulling information through their center like stars collecting light. Community Outreach Director, Linda said, reading the title from the copy of the letter Marcus had shown her. Overseeing charitable initiatives, coordinating with local organizations, developing programs for underprivileged communities. Marcus, this is perfect for you. It's a big change, he hedged, though his heart lifted at her words. Different. World entirely. Different salary too, Linda pointed out gently. Sarah could have her own room, maybe even a small yard, and you'd be home every night for dinner. The image struck him hard, being there for homework, for bedtime stories, for all the small moments he'd been missing. No more struggling to stay awake between shifts, no more choosing between paying for school supplies or new shoes. But doubt crept in, as it always did. What if I'm not qualified? I'm just a janitor and security guard who spends his breaks helping lost visitors find their way around, Linda countered. Who knows every family story in this school? Who needs extra help? Who's struggling? Who gave away his daughter's Christmas present to help a stranger? Sounds like exactly the kind of experience they're looking for. At the hospital that evening, Jerry had similar thoughts. You've got something money can't buy, Thompson. Good instincts about people, heart. Can't teach that in any fancy business school. The night shift was quiet, giving Marcus too much time to think. He found himself in the pediatric ward, where he often spent his breaks. Tonight, little Tommy was awake, fighting his latest round of chemotherapy. The 8-year-old's face lit up when Marcus entered. "Did you really meet the lady from TV?" Tommy asked, his voice weak but excited. "Mom says she's going to help lots of people." "That's the plan," Marcus said, pulling up his usual chair. "She wants me to help too." Tommy nodded sagely, wisdom beyond his years in his tired eyes. "You should. You're good at helping, like when you brought me those Spider-Man comics and didn't tell the nurses." Marcus smiled, remembering how he'd found the comics at a yard sale, knowing they were Tommy's favorite. Small kindnesses adding up over time. The decision crystallized slowly as he made his rounds. Every corner of this hospital held memories of Catherine's final days, of the nurses who'd shown such kindness, of the small ways people helped each other through their darkest hours. Maybe that's what Elena had seen in him, not just one act of kindness on a snowy night, but a lifetime of understanding that sometimes the smallest gestures meant everything. Near dawn, he found Ms. Rodriguez waiting outside the school, earlier than usual. She held up a coffee cup from the local diner. "Thought you might need this. Heard you had some thinking to do. What would you do?" he asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. She considered for a moment, watching the sunrise paint, the sky in winter pastels. Catherine used to say that life gives us moments of grace, chances to become more than we think we are. The question isn't whether you're qualified, Marcus. It's whether you're ready to help create more moments of grace for others. The letter seemed to warm in his pocket, like the blanket he'd given away that snowy night. Perhaps some changes, like some gifts, carried their own kind of magic. The magic of possibility, of doors opening to wider horizons. The glossy magazine was 3 years old, forgotten in the hospital's waiting room until Jerry brought it to Marcus's attention. "Found this while cleaning out the old magazines," he said, pointing to the cover story. "The Blackwood Legacy, a father's final gift to his daughter." The photograph showed a younger Elena, standing beside a distinguished older man with kind eyes and silver hair. They were in what looked like a homeless shelter, serving meals together, both wearing simple aprons over their expensive clothes. The article's subtitle read, "How Thomas Blackwood's Death Changed His Daughter's Vision for Their Corporate Empire." Marcus shouldn't have read it during his shift, but something in Elena's expression in that photo, a mixture of love and loss he recognized from his own mirror, drew him in. The death of Thomas Blackwood sent shockwaves through the business world, the article began. But for his daughter Elena, it wasn't the billion-dollar inheritance that defined her grief. It was the letter he left behind, sharing his greatest regret, that in building his empire, he'd initially forgotten the lesson his own father taught him, that true wealth lies in what you give, not what you keep. Dad spent his last 5 years making up for lost time, Elena revealed in this exclusive interview. He took me to every charitable project, showed me how business could lift communities, not just profit from them. The night before he died, we served meals together at the shelter he'd visited as a boy with his father. He told me that moment, watching people's dignity return with a warm meal and kind word, was worth more than any merger he'd ever closed. The article continued, but a commotion in the ER pulled Marcus away. When he returned later, he found Ms. Rodriguez holding the same magazine, her expression thoughtful. "She came by the school again today," she said without preamble. "Elena, she was asking about our after-school program, about the kids who need extra help with meals and supplies." Marcus leaned against the wall, thinking of Elena in that photo, wearing an apron and serving others. "She's not what people expect, is she?" "Neither are you," Ms. Rodriguez pointed out. "A janitor who quotes Shakespeare to sick kids, a security guard who remembers every patient's story. Maybe that's why she trusts you." The magazine's next page showed another photo, this one harder to look at. Elena at her father's funeral, struggling to maintain composure as her uncle, current board chairman, spoke at the podium. The caption mentioned growing tensions between Elena and the board over her focus on charitable initiatives. The board thinks kindness is weakness. Elena's voice came from the doorway, making them both start. She wore simpler clothes today, a sweater and slacks that would have looked at home at any parent-teacher conference. "Sorry, I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I was looking for Marcus." Ms. Rodriguez quietly excused herself, leaving the magazine open. Between them. "I hate that photo," Elena said, touching the funeral image lightly. "Not because of how sad I look, but because I can see myself already starting to doubt. To think maybe they were right, maybe Dad's vision was too idealistic." "What changed?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he knew. "A blanket," she smiled, but her eyes were serious. "Or rather, the man who gave it to me, someone who had every reason to walk past, to think of himself first, but didn't. It reminded me of Dad, of those nights at the shelter, of who I wanted to be." She turned to the first photo of her and her father serving meals. This was his favorite project. He said every business leader should have to serve others regularly, to remember their humanity. She looked up at Marcus. "That's what I want. You to help me build programs that connect people across all those artificial barriers we create. Rich, poor, executive, laborer, because sometimes it takes a janitor to teach a CEO what real wealth looks like." Marcus thought of Sarah's words about being love-rich, of Catherine's belief in moments of grace. "Your father sounds like a man. He would have liked you," Elena said softly. "He always said you could tell everything about a person by what they do when helping others costs them something." She straightened, composing herself. "The board meeting is next week. They're expecting me to apologize for my erratic behavior and fall in line with their vision. Instead, I'm going to announce a major expansion of our community initiatives. With you, I hope, helping to lead them." The old magazine seemed to pulse with possibility between them, its pages holding not just the past, but perhaps their future too. One where kindness wasn't weakness, where business could have a heart, where a simple blanket could weave lives together in unexpected ways. The movie tickets were Sarah's idea. She'd placed them on the kitchen counter with the determined air of a master strategist. 2 adults, 1 child, Saturday matinee showing of It's a Wonderful Life at the restored Riverside Theatre. "Ms. Rodriguez says it's a classic," Sarah announced over breakfast, trying to sound casual, but practically vibrating with excitement. "And Elena's never seen it. I asked her yesterday when she came to read to our class." Marcus picked up the tickets, remembering how Catherine had loved this movie. "Honey, Elena's probably very busy with—" "Actually, I'd love to." Elena stood in their apartment doorway, a paper bag from the local bakery in her hands. "Sorry, the door was open for the building's maintenance check. I brought breakfast pastries for everyone, but I can come back later." Sarah beamed triumphantly. "Daddy always says good things happen when you share breakfast." The apartment suddenly felt very small to Marcus, not because of its modest size, but because Elena Blackwood was standing in his kitchen looking completely at home despite her cashmere sweater probably costing more than his monthly rent. She'd been stopping by the school regularly, ostensibly to discuss community programs, but somehow always finding time to read with Sarah's class. "The scones are still warm," Eleanor offered, setting down the bag. "And I really would love to see the movie. Dad always talked about these old theaters, how they brought communities together." Sarah was already setting out plates, chattering about how Jimmy from her class said the theater had real velvet curtains, and how Ms. Rodriguez said watching old movies was like time traveling, and wasn't it amazing that Elena had never time? "Traveled before? She's good," Elena murmured to Marcus as Sarah darted to her room to get her special movie-watching sweater. "I've negotiated multi-billion-dollar deals that were less skillfully handled." Marcus laughed despite himself. "She gets that from her mother. Catherine could convince you that anything was your own idea." Something flickered in Elena's eyes at the mention of Catherine, not pity but understanding. "Tell me about her." And somehow, over cooling scones and coffee in mismatched mugs, Marcus found himself talking about Catherine, about her passion for teaching, her belief that every child deserved to feel special, her ability to find magic in ordinary moments. Elena listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she was really hearing the heart of his words. "That's where Sarah gets it," she said thoughtfully. "The way she sees people, really sees them. Like mother, like daughter," Marcus agreed, then added softly, "Thank you, by the way, for spending time with her class. It means a lot to her." "It means a lot to me too," Elena admitted. "Those kids, they remind me why I'm fighting the board. They don't care about stock portfolios or market projections. They care about stories and kindness and whether everyone has a warm coat for winter." The morning light filtered through the kitchen window, catching the silver threads in Elena's dark hair, softening her corporate armor. For a moment Marcus saw past the CEO to the woman who'd sat alone in the snow, seeking something even she might not have been able to name. Sarah returned wearing a sweater that had belonged to Catherine, slightly too big, but treasured nonetheless. "Ready, and I made a schedule. Movie first, then hot chocolate at Mrs. Peterson's cafe, then maybe the bookstore because Elena said she loves books too, and then—" "Slow down, sweetheart," Marcus laughed. "Let's start with the movie." The walk to the theater was like a royal procession in miniature. Elena's security team followed discreetly in their black SUV, while townspeople tried to pretend they weren't staring from shop windows. But Elena seemed oblivious to it all, completely engaged in Sarah's detailed explanation of why feeding ducks was actually very complicated and scientific. Inside the theater, with its faded glamour and popcorn-scented air, something shifted. As the lights dimmed and the velvet curtains parted, Marcus felt Sarah slip her small hand into his right hand. Then, so quietly he might have imagined it, Elena's fingers brushed his left. "Is this okay?" she whispered. On screen, George Bailey was learning about all the lives he'd touched without realizing it. In the dark, Marcus squeezed Elena's hand gently. Some questions didn't need answers, just like some moments didn't need words. Sarah fell, asleep during the final scene, her head resting against Marcus's shoulder. On his other side, Elena wiped away tears as George Bailey's friends rallied around him. "Your daughter was right," she whispered. "Time traveling is amazing." And sitting there, holding his daughter and Elena's hand, Marcus realized that maybe time didn't just move forward. Sometimes it circled back, offering second chances in unexpected packages. Sometimes it brought new beginnings disguised as simple things, like movie tickets, warm scones, and the courage to open your heart again. The tabloid's garish headline hit Riverside like a thunderbolt. "Billionaire Iris's secret romance with janitor, the real reason behind Elena Blackwood's disappearance." Below it, a grainy photo showed Elena holding Sarah's hand as they left. The movie theater, Marcus close behind them, his face partially turned away but still recognizable. Marcus discovered the paper when he arrived for his morning shift at the high school. Someone had left it prominently displayed in the break room, yellow highlighter circling quotes from anonymous sources close to the Blackwood family. "Clearly unstable, endangering shareholder value, inappropriate relationship, working class, gold digger." Linda found him there, staring at the paper as if it might somehow transform into something less destructive. "Oh, Marcus," she said softly, reaching for the tabloid. "Don't read this trash." But the damage was already spreading, like poison in the town's bloodstream. His phone buzzed continuously with messages from unknown numbers. Outside, he could see news vans setting up camp in the school parking lot, their satellite dishes raised. Like predatory antennae, Mr. Thompson. The principal stood in the doorway, his expression grave. "There are reporters asking for comments. I've instructed security not to let them in, but perhaps you should take a personal day." Marcus shook his head. "Sarah needs normal right now, and I need to work." But normal had become a foreign concept. By mid-morning, his Facebook friend requests had exploded. Old acquaintances suddenly remembered his existence. Even Jerry from the hospital called to warn him that patients were being offered money for stories about him. The worst came during Sarah's lunch period. Through the window of Ms. Rodriguez's classroom, he watched his daughter sitting alone at her usual table. The other children had been pulled away by anxious parents, as if poverty or decency might be contagious. "They're saying mean things about Daddy," he overheard Sarah telling Ms. Rodriguez during art class. "Jimmy's mom said Elena only likes us because she's crazy, but that's not true. She likes us because we're love-rich, right?" Before Ms. Rodriguez could answer, Marcus's phone lit up with Elena's name. His heart jumped, but the voice that spoke wasn't hers. "Mr. Thompson, this is Gregory Blackwood, Elena's uncle and chairman of the board. I'm calling from Elena's phone to arrange a meeting. Your situation requires immediate attention." The corporate headquarters of Blackwood Enterprises occupied a gleaming tower in the city, 2 hours from Riverside's quiet streets. Marcus sat in the elaborate conference room, feeling every thread of his freshly ironed shirt, every scuff on his best shoes. Elena sat at the far end of the table, surrounded by board members in expensive suits. Her face was composed, but her fingers worried the edge of a document in front of her. "Let's be direct," Gregory Blackwood began, his silver hair and patrician, features eerily similar to Elena's father in the magazine photo, but lacking the same warmth. "This infatuation is damaging our company's reputation. Markets despise uncertainty, and Elena's behavior has been increasingly erratic since Thomas's death." "With all due respect," Eleanor cut in, "my personal life ceased to be personal when you disappeared for a week, then emerged consorting with—" Gregory gestured dismissively at Marcus. "No offense intended." "Offense very much intended." Elena snapped, a flush rising in her cheeks. "Marcus represents exactly the kind of community engagement Dad believed in. It gave you a blanket, yes. We've all heard the touching story." Gregory's smile didn't reach his eyes. "A story which, I should mention, plays perfectly into the board's concerns about your emotional stability. A CEO who runs away from her, responsibilities to be rescued by a janitor. The shareholders are already calling for blood." Marcus watched Elena's face pale, understanding hitting him like a physical blow. They were using him to destroy her. His kindness twisted into a weapon, against everything she'd fought to achieve. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. Gregory slid a document across the table. "A simple statement. You admit to manipulating the situation for financial gain. We paint Elena as a victim of her own generous nature. She takes a short leave of absence for exhaustion, and everyone wins. There's a very generous compensation package included, and if I refuse, then we're forced to protect the company. Elena will be removed as CEO, her mental fitness questioned, her father's legacy placed in more practical hands. Your daughter's privacy, your employment, your quiet life, all will become very public, very messy." Elena stood suddenly, her chair scraping back. "You can't. The board has already voted, my dear. We're simply offering everyone a graceful exit." Marcus thought of Sarah sitting alone at lunch, of Elena's father serving meals in a shelter, of Catherine's belief that love was the only real wealth worth having. The document before him promised enough money to send Sarah to any college she wanted, to buy a house, to never worry about bills again. He picked up the pen. "Marcus, don't." Eleanor's voice broke. "Please, they can't." "You're right," he said. But he wasn't looking at Elena. He was looking at Gregory, seeing beneath the expensive suit to the poverty of spirit beneath. They can't. They can't buy kindness or integrity or love. They can't purchase the right to destroy your father's dream. He stood, straightening his shoulders. "You want a statement? Here it is. Elena Blackwood is the CEO her father always meant her to be. She understands that real wealth isn't just about money. It's about how you help others grow rich in dignity, in opportunity, in hope. And if you think that makes her weak, You've already lost something more valuable than any market share. The boardroom erupted in angry murmurs. Gregory's face darkened with rage. But Elena was radiant, tears streaming down her face as she smiled. "Security will escort you out," Gregory said coldly. "No need." Marcus turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and that generous compensation package, donate it to the school's lunch program. Some kinds of wealth can't be measured in dollars." Outside, the winter sun was setting behind the city skyline. His phone buzzed. Ms. Rodriguez sending a photo of Sarah teaching Elena's favorite story to her classmates, her chin raised in defiance of their whispers. The caption read, "Some things run in families. Being love-rich is one of them." Marcus smiled, even as he saw the news vans following him home, even as he knew tomorrow would bring more storms. Some battles were worth fighting, not because you could win, but because losing them would cost you something far more precious than victory. The resignation letter was the hardest thing Marcus had ever written. Each word felt like another brick in a wall he didn't want to build, but knew might be necessary to protect those he loved. "Dear Principal Sanders, it is with deep regret that I tender my resignation, effective immediately. The recent media attention has created a distraction that our students don't deserve. While I have treasured my time here—" He couldn't finish. The paper sat on his kitchen table, half-written, while Sarah slept down the hall. Through the window, he could see 2 news vans still parked across the street, their presence a constant reminder of how quickly their quiet life had unraveled. His phone lit up with Elena's name, but he let it go to voicemail. She'd called 12 times since the boardroom confrontation, each message more desperate than the last. The latest one played in his mind. "Marcus, please, don't shut me out. We can fight this together." A soft knock at the door made him tense, but it was only Ms. Rodriguez carrying a casserole dish and a determined expression. "Linda told me you're thinking of resigning," she said without preamble, setting the dish on the counter. "And Elena called me when you wouldn't answer her calls. The kids shouldn't have to deal with this circus." Marcus gestured toward the window. Sarah shouldn't what? Learn that her father stands up for what's right? See that love is worth fighting for?" Ms. Rodriguez sat down, pushing the resignation letter aside. "You know what she did today? When Tommy Jenkins repeated what his parents said about Elena being crazy, she stood up in front of the whole class and said, 'Sometimes the craziest thing is not listening to your heart.'" Marcus felt his throat tighten. "She's 8. She shouldn't have to defend." "No, she shouldn't, but she chooses to, just like you chose to give away that blanket, just like Elena chooses to fight for her father's vision." She paused, letting that sink in. "Catherine would be proud, you know, of both of you." The mention of Catherine brought unexpected clarity. He remembered her favorite saying, "Life's hardest choices are usually between 2 good things or 2 hard things, never between good and bad. Those are the easy ones." His phone buzzed again, but this time it was Jerry from the hospital. "Board meeting footage leaked, going viral. You've got to see this." The video was shaky, clearly recorded secretly by someone in the boardroom. But there was no mistaking Elena's voice as she stood after Marcus left. "My father used to say that a company, like a person, reveals its true character in moments of crisis. Well, congratulations, Uncle Gregory. You've revealed yours, but you've also revealed mine. I will not step down. I will not take a leave of absence. And I will not let you destroy everything my father built just because you're too blind to see. That real growth comes from lifting people up, not pushing them down." The video cut off there, but the damage or triumph was done. Social media was exploding with hashtags. Team Elena, Love Rich, Blackwood Heart. The story was transforming from a scandal into something else, a battle for the soul of corporate. A text from Linda popped up. "Turn on the news now." Elena was standing outside Blackwood Enterprises, facing a wall of cameras. She looked tired but resolute, her cream-colored suit a reminder of that snowy night that had started everything. "My father believed that business could be both profitable and compassionate," she was saying. "That true leadership means recognizing the wealth of human dignity, the dividends of kindness, the return on investment that comes from building communities, not just portfolios. Yes, I disappeared for a week. Yes, I fell in love with a man who reminded me of these essential truths." Marcus's hand shook as he reached for the resignation letter. Behind him, he heard Sarah's bedroom door open. "Daddy?" she called sleepily. "Is Elena on TV?" He turned to find his daughter rubbing her eyes, wearing the too big sweater that had been Catherine's. The sight crystallized everything, past, present, future, merging into a single clear truth. Slowly, deliberately, he tore the resignation letter in half. "Yes, sweetheart," he said, pulling her close. "She's reminding everyone what being love-rich really means." Sarah smiled knowingly. "Is that why you're going to help her?" "How did you know?" "Because," she said simply, "that's what we do. We help. People who need blankets, even if the blanket is just being brave together." Marcus reached for his phone, finally ready to return Elena's calls. Some battles weren't about winning or losing. They were about choosing who you wanted to be when the storm cleared and he had made his choice. The partnership proposal lay open on Elena's desk in her temporary office, a converted classroom at Riverside Elementary, far from the corporate tower's cold glamour. The document outlined a bold vision, the Blackwood Community Initiative, building bridges between business and community. "It's crazy," Elena admitted, running her fingers through her hair. "Proposing to restructure a billion-dollar corporation around community investment principles, all because of a blanket and a small town." "Sometimes crazy is exactly what we need," Marcus replied, thinking of how their unlikely story had captured imaginations across the country. "You'd Love Rich" was trending nationally now, with thousands sharing their own stories of kindness over profit, humanity over bottom lines. Sarah sat cross-legged in the reading corner Ms. Rodriguez had helped them set up, surrounded by financial reports. She decorated with heart stickers. "Ms. Rodriguez says the best stories are about people choosing love over fear," she announced, not looking up from her artwork. "Just like in Beauty and the Beast." Elena smiled, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. They'd set up this makeshift headquarters after the majority of Riverside Elementary's parents had signed a petition supporting Marcus keeping his job. The school board's response had been unexpected, offering Elena the empty classroom as a temporary office, a symbol of the community's solidarity. "The shareholders' meeting is in 3 days," Elena said, turning back to the proposal. "Gregory's gathered quite a few proxy votes, but we've got something he doesn't expect." She pulled out a folder filled with letters, hundreds of them from employees, community members, and organizations touched by Blackwood Enterprises' charitable initiatives over the years. Stories of college scholarships, medical bills paid, small businesses saved, Thomas Blackwood's legacy written in lives changed. "Dad kept every letter," Elena said softly. "He called them his true profit reports. I found them in his personal safe after everything happened." Marcus moved to stand behind her chair, reading over her shoulder. One letter caught his eye, from a night janitor whose daughter had received a Blackwood scholarship. The man wrote about dignity, about being seen as a person rather than a position, about teaching his child that wealth wasn't just about money. "The board thinks this is about us," Marcus said slowly. "About a CEO who lost her way, and a janitor who supposedly took advantage. But it's bigger than that, isn't it?" Elena nodded, reaching for his hand. "It's about what kind of world we want to build, what kind of example we want to set for Sarah's generation." "Speaking of setting examples," Ms. Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, holding a stack of papers. "Your story's been incorporated into next week's ethics curriculum at 3 different universities. And the Riverside Business Association wants to create an annual Blanket of Kindness award for community service." Sarah looked up from her decorating. Can we make the award an actual blanket? A really pretty one, like the one Daddy gave Elena? The adults exchanged glances, something clicking into place. Elena pulled a fresh piece of paper forward, beginning to write rapidly. That's it, she breathed. We don't just defend the charitable initiatives, we expand them. Every Blackwood Enterprises location partners with local communities, not as corporate overlords, but as neighbors. Job training programs, education initiatives, small business incubators. Real people solving real problems, Marcus added, catching her vision. Using business resources to weave communities together, like a blanket, Sarah exclaimed proudly. Ms. Rodriguez picked up one of Sarah's decorated financial reports, smiling at the heart stickers brightening the profit margins. You know, sometimes children see things more clearly than adults. They understand that you can't separate the head from the heart and expect either to work properly. Outside the classroom windows, winter sunshine painted the playground in shades of gold. A group of parents was organizing a rally for the next day, showing support. For both Marcus and Elena, signs were being painted, speeches prepared. The small town had become an unlikely battleground for the soul of corporate America. Gregory thinks this is our weakness, Elena said, adding final touches to the proposal. This connection to community, to real people and their stories. But it's not weakness at all, is it? Marcus thought of the night he'd given away the blanket, how that one action had rippled outward in ways he could never have imagined. No, it's not weakness. It's the kind of strength that builds things that last. Sarah appeared between them, placing one of her heart stickers in the center of the proposal's cover page. There, she said with satisfaction. Now it's ready. Elena traced the heart with her finger, then reached for Marcus's hand again. Some battles were won with hostile takeovers and proxy fights, but others, perhaps the most important ones, were won with heart stickers and blankets, with courage and community, with love rich enough to transform balance sheets into something far more valuable, proof that doing good and doing well weren't opposing forces, but partners in the greatest business of all, building a world worth inheriting. The board meeting agenda sat before each leather chair like a battle plan, printed on expensive paper with the Blackwood Enterprises letterhead. Special shareholders meeting call to order. Review of leadership concerns. Vote of no confidence transition. Planning new business. Elena's copy had a small heart sticker in the corner, Sarah's contribution that morning, along with a whispered, "Remember, Daddy says being brave isn't about not being scared, it's about doing the right thing anyway." Now, sitting in the vast boardroom she'd known since childhood, Elena felt every eye on her. Gregory stood at the head of the table, his silver hair gleaming under the recessed lighting, his confidence radiating like a physical force. "Before we begin," he announced, "I think we should address the unusual presence of a member of our maintenance staff." His gaze flicked dismissively to Marcus, who sat quietly in the observers section, wearing a new suit Elena's assistant had insisted on. "This is a shareholders' meeting, not a public forum. Mr. Thompson holds proxy votes for the Blackwood Foundation," Elena's lawyer interrupted smoothly. "As my client's father's charitable organization held significant shares, Mr. Thompson's presence is both legal and appropriate." A murmur rippled through the assembled shareholders. Gregory's smile tightened fractionally. He hadn't expected them to discover the Foundation's voting rights, buried in years of complex trust arrangements. "Very well," Gregory recovered quickly. "Let's proceed with the agenda. As you've all seen from the distributed materials, recent events have raised serious concerns about the current leadership's stability and judgment." Elena listened as her uncle methodically laid out his case: the disappearance, the inappropriate relationship, the prioritizing of charitable initiatives over profit margins. Each point struck like a physical blow, wrapped in reasonable-sounding corporate language that masks the hunger for power beneath. Our stock has dropped 15 points, Gregory emphasized, clicking through charts and graphs. Ms. Blackwood's emotional approach to leadership has shaken investor confidence. The board recommends immediate action to stabilize. Excuse me, a quiet voice from the back of the room interrupted. Marcus had stood, holding a worn leather portfolio Elena recognized from her father's office. Before we continue, I'd like to exercise the Foundation's right to present relevant material to the shareholders. Gregory's face darkened. This isn't... He's right, Elena's lawyer confirmed. The bylaws are quite clear. Marcus walked to the front of the room, his quiet dignity a stark contrast to Gregory's polished performance. He opened the portfolio, removing a single sheet of paper. This isn't a financial report, he began. It's a letter written by Thomas Blackwood the week before he died. His lawyer provided it to me this morning when I took control of the Foundation's votes. The room stilled. Elena felt her heart skip. She hadn't known about this, hadn't planned it. This was Marcus, acting on his own initiative, fighting not just for her, but for everything her father had believed in. Dear Elena, Marcus read, his voice steady. If you're reading this, then the changes we've begun haven't been completed, and you're facing the resistance I always knew would come. They'll tell you that business is about numbers, not hearts, that compassion is weakness, that you can't serve shareholders and community alike. Elena felt tears, threatening, but held them back. Her father's words reaching across time, strengthening her spine. They're wrong, Marcus continued reading. The greatest shareholders' value lies in building something that outlasts us, something that makes the world better for having existed. The board sees only the profit margins, but you see what I finally learned to see. That true wealth multiplies when shared, that dignity is the highest dividend we can pay. This is irrelevant, Gregory cut in sharply. Emotional manipulation doesn't change the facts. The numbers tell a story, a new voice called from the doorway. Ms. Rodriguez stood there holding a stack of papers. Behind her, a line of people stretched down the hallway. Teachers, nurses, small business owners, all holding their own documents. We've brought quite a few numbers of our own. Gregory's face had gone from confident to concerned. This meeting is closed to the people whose lives have been changed by Blackwood Enterprises community initiatives. Ms. Rodriguez stepped forward. To the small businesses saved, the students educated, the families lifted up. Because we've calculated that value too, and we're here to share those numbers with the shareholders. The agenda sat forgotten on the table as the room erupted in chaos. But Elena wasn't watching Gregory's face or the shareholders' reactions. She was watching Marcus, who met her eyes with quiet confidence. They might not win this battle. The proxy votes Gregory had gathered were substantial, but in this moment, she understood that they'd already won something far more important. They'd proven her father right. Business could have a heart. Love could be a legitimate business strategy. And sometimes the truest profit couldn't be measured in dollars at all. The new Blackwood Enterprises mission statement gleamed on the boardroom's main screen, each word carefully chosen to bridge the gap between profit and purpose. To create lasting value through the dual currencies of financial and social capital, recognizing that true wealth grows best when shared with purpose, managed with wisdom, and invested in human dignity. Gregory stood at the window, his back to the room, as shareholder after shareholder rose to speak. The tide had turned so gradually, then suddenly, that even Elena was still trying to process the shift. My family has held Blackwood stock for 3 generations, an elderly woman was saying, her voice wavering but determined. When my husband's business failed in '82, Thomas Blackwood personally arranged a revival loan. He said something I never forgot. Markets recover, but lost faith in human goodness is harder to restore. Ms. Rodriguez's student impact reports had started it, page after page of data showing how Blackwood's educational initiatives had yielded. Not just college graduates, but community leaders, innovators, and loyal customers. Then came the small business owners, testifying about how company support had helped them survive economic downturns, creating jobs and stability in their communities. The numbers don't lie, Elena's CFO confirmed, highlighting key projections. Communities with active Blackwood initiatives showed 23% higher customer loyalty, 15% better employee retention, and significantly lower operational costs due to strong local partnerships. Marcus sat quietly through it all. Sarah's heart sticker now transferred from the agenda to his lapel. He thought about the night shift. At the hospital, about Jerry and the nurses who knew every patient's story, about how business could either build walls or bridges between people. Perhaps, he said when called upon, the most valuable asset any company can have is the trust of its community, not just as customers or employees, but as partners in creating something larger than profit, a legacy of positive change. Elena watched her uncle's shoulders stiffen. Gregory had always seen her father's compassion as weakness, never understanding that it was actually a different kind of strength. Now, as the proxy votes shifted and the shareholders aligned behind a new vision, she saw the moment he realized his mistake. The vote stands at 67% in favor of maintaining current leadership, the corporate secretary announced, with additional provisions for expanding the community initiative program as outlined in the new proposal. The room erupted in applause, but Elena's eyes were on her uncle. Gregory turned finally, his face a complex mix of emotions. He would be proud, he said quietly, and for a moment, Elena saw past the corporate warrior to the brother who had once shared her father's dreams. I forgot what Thomas always knew, that the Blackwood name wasn't built on mergers and acquisitions. It was built on seeing the value in people others overlooked. It's not too late, Elena offered, thinking of her father's capacity for forgiveness. We could use your experience, your knowledge, just aimed in a new direction. Before Gregory could respond, the boardroom doors burst open. Sarah flew in, followed by a flustered security guard. Did we win? Did love get rich? The tension in the room dissolved into laughter. Even Gregory managed a small smile as Sarah rushed to hug her. Father, then Elena. Yes, sweetheart, Marcus said, lifting her up. Love got very rich today. Then can we get hot chocolate? Ms. Rodriguez says celebrations need hot chocolate, and she brought her special marshmallows. Eleanor looked at the assembled shareholders, serious, business people who had just voted to fundamentally change how a billion-dollar corporation defined success. I think, she said carefully, that hot chocolate is exactly what this meeting needs. In fact, she smiled at Gregory, offering an olive branch. I believe there's a little cafe downstairs that my father used to say made the best hot chocolate in the city. The next hour transformed the austere boardroom into something warmer, more human. Shareholders mingled with community members, sharing stories and ideas. Gregory, after some hesitation, found himself in an intense discussion with Miss Rodriguez about educational innovation in underserved areas. Marcus and Elena stood slightly apart, watching it all unfold. The new mission statement still glowed on the screen, but it was the scene below it that really told the story. People from different worlds finding common ground over paper cups of hot chocolate and hope. You know, Eleanor said softly, Dad used to say that every business decision was actually a choice about what kind of world we wanted to create. Marcus thought of the blanket that had started it all, of how a single act of kindness had rippled outward to change not just their lives, but an entire corporate culture. Your father was right, he replied, watching Sarah charm a group of board members with her earnest explanations of being love-rich. Some investments can't be measured in dollars and cents. Eleanor squeezed his hand, and in that moment, surrounded by the warmth of victory and hot chocolate, they both knew that this was just the beginning of their real work, the daily choice to prove that conscience and commerce could not just coexist, but but flourished together. The house key caught the spring sunlight as Elena placed it in Marcus's palm. Simple brass, nothing fancy, but it represented everything that had changed in the 4 months since the board meeting. The small Victorian home sat on a quiet street, halfway between Sarah's school and the new Blackwood Community Centre, its wraparound porch already decorated with hanging baskets of flowers. "Are you sure?" Marcus asked, though his fingers closed around the key. "It's not too soon." Elena's answer was interrupted by Sarah's excited voice from the porch. "Daddy, there's a window seat in my room, just like in the books." She disappeared back inside, her footsteps echoing through the empty rooms that would soon be filled with their combined lives. "I'm sure," Eleanor said softly. "I've never been more sure of anything." The moving van pulled up, and with it came their extended family of supporters. Ms. Rodriguez directed operations like a gentle general, organizing boxes by room. Linda from the cafeteria arrived with homemade cookies. Jerry from the hospital helped carry furniture, sharing quiet jokes with Marcus about how far a simple blanket's warmth could spread. They found Sarah in what would be the living room, arranging her books on the built-in shelves. At the center, in a place of honor, sat a cream-colored wool blanket, not the original one from that snowy night, but its twin, now wrapped in all the meaning they'd created together. "Look what I found in one of the boxes," Sarah said, holding up Catherine's old photo album. "Ms. Rodriguez says we should put new pictures next to the old ones, so we can see how love grows." Marcus felt Elena's hand slip into his as they watched. Sarah carefully arranged the album on the shelf beside the blanket. The past and present fitting together, not competing but completing each other. Through the window they could see the Blackwood Community Centre taking shape downtown, its modern lines softened by the community garden being planted around it. Every week, corporate executives worked alongside local residents, learning each other's stories while they planted hope in the form of vegetables and flowers. "The quarterly reports came in," Elena mentioned, helping Sarah arrange her books. "The new initiatives have already increased community engagement by 40%. Gregory's actually excited about expanding the program nationwide." Marcus smiled, remembering his former supervisor's surprise at becoming the head of community relations. "Amazing what can happen when we value the right kinds of wealth." Sarah looked up from her arranging. "Does this mean we're officially love-rich and money?" "Rich now?" "No, sweetheart," Marcus said, pulling both Sarah and Elena close. "It means we finally understood they're the same thing when you use them right." The key in his pocket seemed to warm against his heart, like that first blanket had so many months ago. Some doors, once opened, led to places you never knew you were looking for until you found them. And some kinds of wealth, once discovered, could never be measured, only shared, growing richer with every heart touched, every life changed, every moment cherished. 1 year later, the photograph captured a moment that seemed both inevitable and miraculous. Marcus, Elena, and Sarah on the same park bench where it all began, now surrounded by blooming spring flowers instead of snow. The cream-colored blanket wrapped around all three of them as Sarah held up her latest report card, her smile bright enough to light up the darkest night. Behind them, the park had transformed. The Blackwood Community Centre's reading garden spread out from the old bench, which now bore a small plaque, where a blanket became a bridge. Each evening, parents and children gathered there to read together, sharing stories and warmth, just as Catherine had once done with Sarah. "Look what I found," Sarah said, pulling a dog-eared wish list from her pocket, the same one she'd written a year ago. The fourth item caught Marcus's eye. "For Daddy to not work so hard." Elena leaned her head on Marcus's shoulder as Sarah snuggled between them. "Wish granted?" she asked softly. Marcus looked at his family, at the community they'd built, at the legacy of kindness that had grown from one cold night's choice. "No," he said, smiling. "Some wishes come true even bigger than we dare to dream."